My name is Don Marsh, and I'm a member of CENSE, the Coalition of Eastside Neighborhoods for Sensible Energy.
CENSE is an all-volunteer group of citizens like you, with jobs and mortgages and busy families. But we also have some smart engineers and people with decades of experience in the utility industry. We support the growth plans of our cities and businesses, and we want reliable power for everyone. We believe there are right-sized, forward-thinking solutions that accomplish these goals while respecting the character of our neighborhoods. PSE and CENSE have different views on Energize Eastside. According to PSE, it's the only way to keep the lights on in Eastside cities. CENSE thinks there are a number of alternatives that are less costly and less harmful to residents and the environment. We'll give you our best arguments, and then you can decide whether we should think twice before we spend $200 million on this project. Let's start with the question of how to forecast demand for electricity. For example, here is a reasonable forecast from Seattle City Light. Notice how Seattle shows 27 years of historic data to give some context for their forecast? The yellow dots at the top of the graph show winter peak loads that were measured for each year. We've added an orange trend line that shows a slight decline over the years. Like every utility, Seattle City Light is very cautious, so they predict a small increase going forward, reversing the long-term trend. But it's a gradual increase, less than 1% per year. The decrease in Seattle's peak loads is not an isolated phenomenon. This graph is from the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee, which includes PSE. The top line shows winter peak loads declining throughout the region during the last decade. The committee offers this explanation, quote, "The region's aggressive conservation efforts are purposely dampening loads. Utilities are considering use of electronic devices such as televisions, computer hardware, and household appliances, and they are evaluating efficiency improvements in transmission and distribution systems as they forecast future demand. Combined, these factors appear to be having a significant impact on load." With those facts in mind, let's consider what a reasonable forecast for the East Side might look like. I'll show you PSE's forecast in a minute, but let's start with 3 forecasts for other cities in the Pacific Northwest. Portland is predicting demand growth of 0.4% per year, even though their population and economy are growing faster than ours. At that rate, we wouldn't hit PSE's system capacity line until the year 2033. Portland keeps growth low by embracing technology and policy solutions used by utilities in many states. PSE has studied similar options. In fact, PSE's most recent planning document includes a 350-page analysis of these programs, but PSE isn't implementing any of them. Instead, the company buried the report in the 13th appendix of their plan and didn't mention it in the main text.
Seattle is predicting load growth of 0.8% per year. They have rates of population and economic growth that are similar to the East Side's, and their weather is eerily similar to ours. Is it reasonable to ask if PSE could achieve a similar rate of load growth?
Here is a 1% annual growth rate predicted for the city of Bellevue by an independent consultant studying reliability at the same time PSE made their forecast. This matches the rate of population growth predicted by the Puget Sound Regional Council. Since Bellevue is the fastest growing city on the East Side, this is a reasonably aggressive projection for the East Side as a whole. The 1% line hits the system capacity line in 2021, which gives us a few years to study alternatives and identify the best solution for our communities. Now let's look at PSE's prediction, an average growth rate of 1.7% per year. This puzzles us. Why does PSE expect electricity demand to grow so much faster than population or economic growth? Is this a real forecast, or a convenient way for PSE to justify a project they want to build for other reasons? To find out, CENSE has been asking for a qualified consultant to provide an independent load forecast. The city of Bellevue is considering our request, but is not committed to doing this. Perhaps you're asking yourself, does it really matter whether the date is 2017 or 2021? If we're going to have a problem in a few years, why don't we just build the project now and get it over with?
Well, there's another fact you need to know. PSE hired a consulting firm named E3 to study alternative solutions. E3 found 56 megawatts of cost-effective savings using electrical efficiency, distributed generation, and demand-side resources. Their report is available on PSE's website. Taking E3's savings into account,
We have 15 years before capacity becomes an issue. Here's the choice. Spend $200 million to meet a questionable deadline in 2017, or put $40 million back into the pockets of customers, according to E3's estimate, and delay this project until at least 2030. The difference is $250 million. There's another problem with PSE's graph, but this will take a little explanation. According to the Vice President of Transmission Planning for the Bonneville Power Administration, Energize Eastside is part of a regional transmission plan developed by PSE, BPA, and Seattle City Light to solve three problems: load for the East Side, load for Seattle, and a grid reliability issue for BPA. This third issue is illustrated in the diagram on the right. The Columbia River Treaty obligates the U.S. to send Canada free electricity in return for river flow controlled north of the border. The electricity normally flows through a big 500 kilovolt transmission line operated by BPA near Snoqualmie. Here is one path the electricity can take. Planners worry about what would happen if this line breaks. Fortunately, there is another path. But if that line also breaks, a surge of electricity would theoretically flow through our little 115 kilovolt line, causing problems if our line is already serving peak load to the east side. There are two ways to fix that problem. PSE can upgrade our line to 230 kilovolts with Energize Eastside, or BPA can build a redundant line that can take the full load. In that case, Canadian electricity wouldn't need to flow through the east side, and our line would be adequate to serve our needs for many years. BPA already has a plan to build their line, but they put that project on hold, hoping that Energize Eastside would handle the load for them. Is it fair for PSE's customers to pay this cost themselves? Can we get some help from other states, or the federal government that signed the treaty?
Now we know enough to understand the power outage scenario the company is predicting for the east side. It can only occur on a very cold winter workday, the kind that happens only a few days each year, and only during the highest usage that happens around 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night. Our infrastructure has plenty of capacity to handle that, even in the year 2022 with the aggressive growth rates PSE is forecasting. So PSE adds that big surge of Canadian electricity flow from BPA failures. This adds stress to the system, but not enough to cause a power outage. Then PSE simulates what would happen if all power generation in King County is turned off. This is more a voluntary choice than a realistic scenario, but PSE is simulating the worst case. Now PSE's transformers are getting hot. PSE responds by taking corrective actions. They isolate the north and south ends of the east side, which doesn't cause lights to go out, but it makes the system more vulnerable to any other problem that occurs. Finally, a car hits a pole or a tree takes down some wires, and the system can no longer adapt. If all these things happen at the same time, our lights might go out. But there are neighborhoods on the east side that regularly lose power when it gets windy. If we want to improve reliability, there are much better ways to spend our money.
All of PSE's power flow studies and their demand graph include this assumption that BPA's lines are down, and 270 megawatts of Canadian electricity is surging through the east side. We have reason to believe at least 100 megawatts of that power would be flowing through our particular lines. If BPA fulfills their obligation to provide reliable electricity to Canada, we can subtract 100 megawatts from PSE's graph. That delays capacity issues until 2025 at the earliest, even using PSE's aggressive growth projections. So far, we've mentioned three ways that we can delay capacity problems and save money: a more realistic load forecast, E3's savings, and BPA building its own transmission lines. There are even more ways to avoid a capacity crunch, but it's time for us to talk about an elephant in the room that many people don't know about and PSE is trying to avoid. The elephant is coal. Many Eastside residents don't know that a quarter of our electricity comes from an extremely dirty coal plant located in Colstrip, Montana. It's hard to believe an environmentally conscious area like ours is served by a plant that is the #1 emitter of carbon dioxide and mercury in the West, and the 8th dirtiest power plant in the nation. For many reasons, it's no longer a question of if this plant will be shut down, but when. PSE is a major stakeholder and doesn't want Colstrip to be retired. They claim it will cost customers hundreds of millions of dollars each year if it is taken offline. The impending closure of Colstrip raises big questions about our energy future. How is PSE going to compensate for the loss of a major power source? Experts think some of that gap will be filled by a couple of new power plants that use natural gas. If one of those plants is located closer to the east side, it will improve overall reliability, reduce transmission losses, and save money. It would also make Energize Eastside unnecessary. Before we spend $200 million on an expensive transmission project, let's figure out what the east side is going to do in a post-coal era. To summarize, we've shown 4 problems with Energize Eastside. PSE's forecasts are unrealistic. PSE ignores findings by E3 that would save energy and money. And Energize Eastside does not improve reliability for the customers who must pay for it. Furthermore, Energize Eastside doesn't fit into a comprehensive plan for a coal-free future. It's important to understand that PSE makes most of its profits from building infrastructure. State laws enacted a century ago encourage power companies to build infrastructure to reach citizens near and far. Unlike other states, Washington has not updated these laws to shift incentives towards smarter technology. CENSE will encourage legislation to address this problem. As a regulated monopoly, PSE is guaranteed a return of at least 10% on $200 million for the next 40 years. That's especially attractive for PSE right now because the Australian hedge fund that owns PSE must sell its holdings in the next 2 to 3 years when the fund expires. Having a big infrastructure project on the books will increase PSE's resale value and increase profits for the fund's investors. The question must be asked, is PSE the kind of company that would prioritize profits over the well-being of its customers? This chart shows that PSE has been ordered to pay substantial fines for mistreating its customers in every year but one for the past 8 years, culminating in an order to return $35 million to customers last year for overcharging them. Through its actions, PSE has earned a heightened level of scrutiny and skepticism. When it comes to Energize Eastside, some people worry that PSE has already finished baking the cake and now we're just arguing about the color of the frosting. We don't think that's the case. In fact, we haven't decided if we want dessert yet. In December, PSE's Community Advisory Group decided to recommend 2 routes for the overhead transmission lines. There was never any vote taken on these recommendations, and none of the participants ever signed the final report. In fact, 8 out of the 20 members signed a dissenting report, which complains that the group was never allowed to consider reasonable alternatives. Among the dissenting signatures was the City of Newcastle, which stated that Energize Eastside would have significant and irreparable impacts on homes and businesses in their community. Since Newcastle is a permitting agency in this process, this is a big deal that hasn't been well reported in the press. In January 2015, CENSE began working with Bellevue's independent consultant to get a second opinion on whether this project is the best way to serve our need for reliable, affordable power. We will consider alternative solutions during the EIS process that is scheduled to begin in March. The EIS provides an opportunity for public involvement and comment, so we will keep you posted on that. I can't emphasize enough how important your voice is on this issue. PSE has a strong marketing department and a lot of political and lobbying power. There is no governmental agency with the authority to oversee this process, although council members have an important role. For these reasons, the future of Energize Eastside depends on citizens. What can you do? Visit our website, CENSE.org. It contains links to help you contact your city council, write letters to local newspapers, a link to our Facebook page, and you can sign up for updates through our newsletter. We also encourage you to sign up for 20 free LED light bulbs from PSE at pse.com/homeprint. This is a great deal that hasn't been promoted very well and will make a difference in your electricity usage. Finally, if you'd like to share this presentation or see it again, go to CENSE.org/video.